webinar today. The topic is the brand new WellView 10.3 maintenance release. My name is Fiona Hamilton, and I'll be leading the webinar. Rob Herman, based out of our Houston office, is going to be helping with the Q&A panel. You'll notice that your phones are muted, but we would definitely love to hear from you. So please ask questions as we go. Rob is on standby to help in the Q&A panel, and I will be pausing throughout the presentation to also take a look at Q&A and make sure we're answering the questions that come in. So we would love for you to participate, and let's get started. So the topic today, the WellView 10.3 maintenance release. I'm going to review the WellView development release cycle, so let you know where we are on our timelines. Then we're going to dive right in and take a look at the WellView 10.3 highlights, and there are many. And then finally, documentation. Where can you get the details if you want to learn more? So we typically have a major release of WellView every 4 to 5 years. A major release of WellView involves changes to the data model. Generally, it's growth, but sometimes there are underlying table changes. This is a big deal. This means that your upgrade from one major version to the next has to take into consideration all of these changes because it can impact your reporting, your points of integration, your querying, everything. The data model is the foundation of it all. So it's not something we change every day. We're looking to the next major release being something called WellView 11, most likely at the end of 2019, early 2020 timeframe. Now within these major releases, we have maintenance releases. The first release of WellView was 10.0 in May of 2014. We've subsequently had maintenance releases, including a 10.1 in 2015, a 10.2 in 2016, and now WellView 10.3, January of 2018. The takeaway from this slide is to note that those numbers are incrementing, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. The reason is that that signals that there are new calculations in the application. Why is that important? It's important if you're also a client that uses the data warehouse, because you want the data warehouse version to match the application version, so you are seeing the same calculations in both places. So that 0.3 signals to you there are new calculations in the maintenance release. All of these releases use that same underlying WellView 10 data structure. There is no change to the WellView data structure. So a question to you, if you can use the Q&A panel to answer, what version of WellView is your company currently running? Are you on 10.2, 10.1, 10.0, or even 9 in some cases? So please send us a note in the Q&A panel. Curious to know what versions the clients are on. Okay, great, thanks. We see some answers coming in. We've got a range of different versions of 10. Some WellView 9s. All right, so on to the main event, WellView 10.3. What's new in this maintenance release? So what we're going to be showing today are the changes, or the delta, from 10.2 to 10.3. So for the clients that are on 9 or earlier versions of 10, there's been a lot of change, substantial change, even up to 10.2. So we're just specifically showing 10.2 to 10.3 right now. The first enhancement is something called search, and it's a new way to look for results in the database. So let me just show you right in the application. I'm going to pop over to WellView, and here we see the WellView app, and I'll maximize that. So at the top of the screen, you're going to see there's a new option here to search entire list or search selected wells. When I type in a criteria, so something like the word corrosion, and hit enter or the little search icon, what's happening is that WellView is searching through every single text and comment field in the data model. So think about that, every single text and comment field in the data structure, and it's returning results where corrosion has been found. So it shows me a list of the wells where corrosion has been found in some table somewhere. It lists the tables, and it shows me the individual records. So I can click on one of those rows and go right to edit data to get more detail about that record where corrosion was found. So this is awesome. I didn't have to go build a query to go looking in production failure table cause field, because maybe I had no idea where to look or where to begin. Is corrosion in a time log comment? Is corrosion in a failure record? Is corrosion in a daily summary? This search is a global search on all of the text and comment fields, and it returns all of the results. Once I get the results, as you saw, we can click through to edit data. I could also open up this well if I wanted to look at a report or the schematic. I could highlight all of the results and pop over to a multi-well report to see more detail. So in this case, it's relating to failure data. So I might choose to look at a failure report. Okay, so when the query, or the search I should say, is run, you get the results, you can take some action. Search will look at up to 1,000 entities at a time. Alternatively, you can search on selected wells. So I could highlight a group of wells and look for any wells where Randy Moss was listed as a contact. So there, it just went through all of the text and memo fields for all of those highlighted wells and returned results where Randy Moss was listed in job contacts. So what do you do if you have more than 1,000 wells to search? Well, this is where things like grouping come into play. So perhaps you would group your wells into smaller sets, groups that have fewer than 1,000 entities, and then you would search on those already grouped lists. Or perhaps you run a query to further limit the wells, and then you search to look in that specific query result. So any questions about the search menu? It's a fantastic new feature. The end users are going to love it. Admittedly, to use queries, you have to understand the underlying data structure. This removes that barrier. You can simply search on all text and memo fields to easily find results. Okay, the next feature I wanted to show you is a new option in queries. So here are a few example queries. One is the well name list. What we've added in is something called an in criteria, which allows you to do things like paste in lists of well names. So I'll show you a little example here. I have a list of well names here in this notepad. Maybe it's an email, maybe it's Excel, but it's a list of wells, and I'm going to copy them, paste them into the query box, and now WellView is going to return that list of wells. So this is a fairly common request from clients. You know, how can I easily query for a list of wells? In earlier versions of WellView, you could do it one well at a time with quick find. You could build a query with custom SQL to go looking for all of these separate well names. Well, now you can simply do it with this in criteria. So let me edit that query so you can see how it was built. This is an example with a prompt so that end users can type in different lists or paste in different lists. But what you'll see is in this criteria dropdown, there's a new option called in. So a few questions around that. Yes, it needs to be an exact match when you're typing in those well names. So let me go back to my example here. When you're pasting in those well names need to match the well names in WellView. Can this be used on other fields like UWI or API? Absolutely. It can be used on any field. It's a general concept to use this in operator. So question for folks on the lines. Do you see an application for search and for in? Or do you have any additional questions about those two new features? Okay, another feature to talk about. We are including third-party PDF controls in the WellView builds now. So you're going to see some additional system files that relate to third-party PDF controls. And this is going to give us two new features. The first is to be able to save a report to PDF. So to save a single well or multi-well report to a PDF. And the second is to be able to show a PDF within a report block. So let me show WellView again. And I have some examples in sample 11. So I'll open up sample 11 to a report template that's designed to show image files. So in WellView 9, WellView 10, you have this option to show a block within a report and to show attached image files in that block. So in this example well, I've got a bitmap, I've got a JPEG, I've got a TIFF or a GIF. It's an image file that will show up in the block. The enhancement here is that if you have attached a PDF, it will show up in the same way. So there is a PDF I put in this little case study just as an example. It's a 6-page PDF, so I can actually use the page control to flip through the various pages of the PDF in that block. So why did we add this feature? Really, it's for clients who said, hey, you know, we have things like wellhead assemblies given to us by vendors in PDF. We'd like them to show up right within WellView, so it feels like it's a part of WellView, but the PDF is a separate file in the older versions of WellView, so we have to launch it to look at it. So it's a way for you to show PDFs right within a report. Also a request from clients who generate end-of-well summary reports. Commonly, PDFs are a part of that end-of-well package, so this lets you include it right within. Now, the first feature there was the ability to save a report to a PDF. So what that looks like, if I go to any template and I right mouse click, I have the option to save as PDF. Simply what this is doing is it's going to save all of the pages of your active report to a PDF. So when I click on it, it asks me where I want to put this. I'm going to save it to my desktop, and I have just put a 4-page PDF together. Let me just share that because it also opens it up. So here's that opened PDF. It's a 4-page PDF generated directly from the report. This does not take away the need to have something like Win2PDF for your batch reporting. Batch reporting, printing to PDF from this print dialog, so you get these features like anchoring of reports and choosing which anchors to print. That still requires a PDF print driver. Okay, so there are really two very specific features that we've added, and they relate to showing PDFs in reports and being able to print directly from a report. And yes, just to clarify, this save report to PDF works for single and multi-reports. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some major advancements, I guess you'd say, in terms of the data that we can store in WellView and the analysis and workflows that we've built from it. So what I'm showing you here is something called Time Tracks, which is a tab within WellView, and we'll take a look at it live. But I just want to set the stage here in PowerPoint as to what this is all about. Time Tracks is a time-based schematic. Just like our depth-based schematic, you have different templates and you can pick and choose what columns of data you want to show. Time Tracks allows you to correlate any time-based data in one of these templates. So what we're seeing here is a combination of most likely manually entered data in WellView. We've got some phases. That code 2 is from the time log. If you skip over to the BHA column, that's bit BHA detail, manually entered in WellView. And then you're going to see some really busy curves. That is actual rig sensor data that has been imported into WellView. So the first concept here is to bring together these two worlds. WellView contextual data, less granular, and very granular detailed rig sensor data, to bring them together into the same page. So commonly, if you'll work with drilling engineers, geologists, they're watching a real-time viewer of the data. But if they want to look back at what happened yesterday, or if they're trying to do a look back on a well they drilled last year, there isn't an easy way for them to combine that sensor data with something like a daily drilling report, or maybe formation lithology. That's in two separate systems generally. So they'll go flipping through reports and they'll look at the historic curves and they can make it work. But this is about giving them a tool to have all of that data in one place. This is not intended to be in real time. So this is not replacing something like a Pason Data Hub or a real-time viewer for up to the second details while you're drilling. This is after that. So this is looking at yesterday's data, or the well you drilled 2 months ago's data, or maybe an hour ago's data, but it's not a replacement for a real-time viewer. It is about bringing that real-time world into the WellView world to give context. What does this mean? This means a whole new level of detail in WellView. So not just a daily drilling report summary or a time log that spans 4 hours or even 24 hours saying you're drilling. It's a whole new level of detail that you would never have captured in WellView manually before. It also gives us a great tool for lookbacks and offset analysis. So let's take a look at this right in WellView. I'm going to open up a sample well to Time Tracks. So here's the Time Tracks tab, the visualizer within the single well file. And as I mentioned, there are templates that you can define. The templates control how much data you're going to correlate in these columns. You can zoom in and see more detail. You'll notice as you move your mouse over the curves, in the bottom of the pane, it's actually going to show you the value from that curve. So it's meant to be a tool for analysis to help you, dig in and look at this time-based data. Perhaps I'm a geologist and I want to see things like bit depth and ROP related to formation. Well, you can do that too. Right? So now I'm showing some WellView data, my prog formation tops and my actual formation tops related to bit depth and ROP from sensors. Maybe I want to look at something like a daily drilling report. Wrap your head around this. This is a different way of looking at a daily drilling report with sensor data. We've got manual time log, we've got BHA, we've got drilling parameters and the detailed sensor data, and I have this nice little anchor so I can present it day to day, just like the daily drilling report. All of this data can be exported out to Excel. There's a little Excel button. And if I choose to do that, it exports out all of this, the WellView data and the sensor data, and drops it into an Excel file. Okay, so that's the first step. We've pulled down sensor data, and I'm going to get to the how you do that, how you get the sensor data in. But we've pulled down the sensor data, and we're able to present the sensor data beside the WellView data. Once this data is pulled in, I can do some neat things, like I can add it into reports. So here are two example reports. One on the left-hand side is a conventional daily drilling report, but you'll see we're showing the sensor curves, ROP and bit depth on the right side. So just in the same way that you can add a schematic track into a report, you can add a time track into a report. So this is actually really powerful, because in your typical daily drilling report, you get one depth at the end of the day, and you get one ROP averaged for the day. Not particularly useful level of detail. Look at what those curves give me. Those curves give me 10-second breakdowns of this sensor data. On the right-hand side, here's another presentation. We've got a schematic built from our bit BHA details, and then we've got the sensor drilling parameters in combination with the manual drilling parameters. So there are many ways to present this underlying sensor data to give this whole new level of detail to your reporting. Okay, so another concept, and then we'll go back to WellView. It is possible to derive a detailed time log from those sensor curves. So in the drilling world, the behavior of those curves actually tells you, are you sliding or rotating, making a connection, reaming, tripping, washing, circulating. Okay, so there's this very detailed time log that can be derived from the sensor curves. We can import that derived time log. It's called rig activity or rig state. So the companies that provide the sensor curves can also provide this concept of rig activity or rig state. So here on the far left columns, these two columns, the brightly colored one and the gray one, this is that detailed rig state. So let me zoom in. So to put it in perspective, you know, I've zoomed in a few times. We're looking at a time span from 7:40, to 9 a.m. In my manually entered time log, in that blue column, the rig site supervisor has rightly said, we're drilling. But look at the level of detail I get in that rig activity column. You weren't just drilling, you were washing, you were circulating, you were washing, you were sliding, you were rotating, you were reaming. This is a bonus you get when you pull these curves down. This whole new level of detail for a drilling time log. So this is a huge concept. By simply pulling that additional curve down, we can present it in here. Our calc engine can also read it, so we can summarize these rig activity calcs throughout the data model. So imagine that I went to something like a daily drilling report. So I'm just going to pop over here to a daily drilling report. I'm going to find a day where we're drilling. It's fine. There, that's a good one. Let me zoom out this whole page. So if you look at this report, what we're illustrating here is the rig site user typed in the time log for the day, 24 hours of drilling. Perfect. But the rig activity tells us a whole new level of detail around that story. You weren't just drilling, you were actually rotating for 12.77 hours. You were sliding for 4.21 of those hours. You were tripping in, you were tripping out. So this pie chart really illustrates the breakdown of that drilling time. And this is, again, a bonus we get simply by importing in that rig activity curve. So the calc engine's reading that rig activity curve. Time tracks can display that rig activity curve. Now the next step in this project was, okay, well that's great. Now I can see the curves. I've got this rig activity concept. That's fantastic. It means that my rig site supervisor can just focus on the context, explaining the gaps, and the sensors are going to give me all that fine detail. There's no need for my rig site supervisor to have a super detailed drilling time log because we get that automatically. So some really big concepts there. But what about these curves? Can you populate the drilling parameter table from those curves? So the answer is yes, and rig state's a part of that equation. So you can appreciate if we pull down all this sensor data, thousands and thousands of data points, and if we just wrote those data points into the drilling parameter table, you would end up with thousands and thousands of drilling parameters, and that's too much. Rig activity or rig state helps us group those thousands of data points into bigger chunks of time, more meaningful chunks of time. So what we're able to do is for every relevant block of rig activity, we can create a drilling parameter. And this is what it looks like. I click on a button, we go through, we take all of those slices of rig activity time, we get an average from the drilling parameters, raw sensor data, we get an average, and we populate the drilling parameter table. So how great was that? From an end user perspective, I click on a button and voila, I get all my drilling parameters populated. So these little gray blocks that just showed up, if I double click, that's going to take me to the drilling parameter table, and you can see that we were able to populate all of these drilling parameters directly from the sensor data. So we know the start and end date, we know the start and end depth, we know the duration of time, we know what you were doing. You were rotating, you were sliding, you were tripping, you were reaming, what have you. We know weight on bit, RPM, flow rate, SPP, all of the values that you have pulled in from those curves, we can turn around and write into the drilling parameter table. In order to figure out which drill string the drilling parameters belong to, we're relying on two dates that the user would put in on the drill string table. So date pickup and date out of hole. And by putting in those two dates, or at least the first one, if this BHA is still in the hole, we're able to go and assign those drilling parameters to the right BHA. So this is a fantastic new feature for the rig site users and also the people who use this data. What are your drilling parameters like today? I'm going to guess 99% of our clients say not very good. Maybe you get one, or maybe you get a couple, or you're maybe one of the clients who ask your rig site supervisors to put in a lot of them, like 30 or 40 in a day, and they're spending hours doing that. So there are some huge advantages to be able to just simply import this data from a quality perspective and also from the amount of time it takes to manually put them in. Okay, so another thing I'll point out here, I've just moved over to a day where we haven't yet generated drilling parameters. We do have another feature that lets you manually define a range of time and create a drilling parameter. So if you don't have rig activity from your sensor company, or you don't trust it, or you want to have more control over this, maybe I want to zoom in here and create drilling parameters for small chunks of this curve, I can manually create drilling parameters by using this mode and my control key to drag over a region where I want to create that parameter. Okay. So there are two ways to create parameters from the underlying sensor data. The one is more automated, and we rely on that rig activity, and the second is a manual way to do it. But the bottom line is they don't have to type in these numbers anymore. This is fantastic. Okay, so questions about rig activity. Well, actually, hang on there for a second. I will get back to how we pull in the data and how we pull in rig activity. So just hold tight on that. Okay, so we've pulled in the sensors. We've pulled in rig activity. Our calc engine's aware of this data. We're able to use it in this workflow to populate drilling parameters. The next thing is, well, what about multi-well? So I can make use of multi-well concepts to pull the data out into Excel, to report from the calc engine, but we've added in this really nice tool called curve analysis. So I'm going to highlight 4 wells, perhaps from a pad we've just recently drilled. I'm going to click on the curve analysis tab. I'm going to highlight those wells, and I'm going to see in this drop-down a list of all of the depth-based curves that have been imported. So this is a distinct list of all of the depth-based curves. So I'm going to pick and choose the curves I want to overlay, and look at what's happening here. The curves from all of those wells and well bores have been overlaid by depth. Chances are your drilling engineers are doing this outside in Excel or Spotfire, or they're wanting to do this. Okay, so we are now able to take that depth-based sensor data and overlay it in this tool. This tool is all about analysis. So here are some of the other features. You know, maybe I decide some of these wells aren't representative, so I'm just going to turn them off in here and focus on these 3. I want to present them beside WellView formations, so I can show formations and lithology here. I want to zoom in on formation. Perhaps I turn off these others because we're just going to look at the common formation. I want to see WellView phase data, so I can add phases in there. I can add bit and BHA details in there. And I can click and drag and move these curves around to do the analysis. Okay, so let's focus on this formation, this ZZZ formation. The first thing you'll notice is that the formation tops are all a little bit different. They're pretty close, but they're a little bit different. So we also have a feature that allows you to depth adjust them so they all have the same top. Then I might zoom in. I'm using my mouse wheel to zoom in. And I'm looking at these curves and their behavior. So ROP is consistently higher. Which well is that? If I click on sample 52, yes, I can clearly see that ROP is higher. I can control the scales on these curves. I can filter out spikes. I can do all sorts of cool stuff. Well, okay, ROP is consistently higher for sample 52. Well, what bit and BHA did we have in the hole? Oh, we had this one. See, I get a flyover from the BHA detail. What about the phases? Okay, were we ahead or behind in our plan? What about the formation lithology? I get these pop-ups of WellView data presented beside the sensor data. So this is a new tool meant for analysis. It has, a wealth of features in this first version, 1.0. But as we've been showing this to more and more clients, they're asking for more and more functionality. So there's a lot of excitement around what this analysis can do. So we have requests to be able to compare these by TVD depth and requests to also compare time. So to be able to pull in the sensor time-based data and have a normalized date, like spud date, 0 date, and everything's normalized to spud date. So we're already setting our focus on version 2.0, but version 1 here is very, I guess you'd say, feature rich already. So that is a new tab within WellView. Okay, so all of this looks fantastic, great, everyone's happy. How do I get the data? The sensor data is being captured out at the rig site in something called a WITS format. Now, all of these companies like Pason, NOV, Halliburton, Schlumberger, all of these players, CanRig, like you name it, they are most likely offering to you a service to read that data from a WITSML server. So what we've built is a way to connect to their WITSML server Decide which curves you want to pull down and to pull them down. There's a way to do this manually from the WXML import add-in, and there is a new service in Task Manager that lets you do this in an automated fashion. Practically, how does this work? Someone at head office or the field office is going to own setting up this process. The first step is to connect the WellView well to the well on the WXML server, because they don't always match. You know, well names don't always match. It's just the way things are. So a human says this well in WellView matches this well in the WXML server, chooses the curves to download, and then sets it up to pull them down every hour, let's say, or every 15 minutes. So this automated service is just going to sit there pulling down the curves. Okay, so now we've got these curves in the office, and our drilling folks and geologists can look in there and see some of this cool stuff, but the rig site user needs the data. That's where sync comes in. So when we pull the curves down, we basically chunk them into the time curve table. So we've tried to optimize this by making small chunks of data so that when the rig site user wants the data, needs the data to fill in drilling parameters or do some comparisons, they simply use sync as the mechanism to get the data from head office out to the rig site. So this is how it can work. We have questions about, well, could this happen out at the rig site? I think practically yes in an offshore platform scenario, but there is some credential management, there's connecting to the WXML server, there's figuring out, which curves to pull down, making sure the mnemonics all map. It's unfortunately not as easy as it should be, because all of these WXML server providers are a little bit different. So at least to begin, we would imagine that this is the model, that someone in the office, an administrator, for instance, would own this process to make sure it gets set up, and then the rig site users would use sync as the way to pull the data. So what curves can you pull down? You can pull down any of the sensor curves that are being housed in that WXML log object. And for some of those providers, it does include rig state, but not for all of them. Okay, so some of them have rig activity, rig state, not all of them do. We've had clients ask if they can use their own rig activity algorithm, and the answer is yes. We'd want to work with you to see how to incorporate that. But we are open to, working with you to help get rig activity in WellView because it adds so much value. There's a huge push on all of those providers, Pason, NOV, all of these folks. They have it to a certain degree or they're working on it. In terms of whom we've worked with and tested with, heavily Pason, NOV, Halliburton, Schlumberger, some of these WXML aggregators like Petrolink and Kongsberg, we also have familiarity with them too. So this is the model that you would use if you want to be getting updates during drilling to leverage things like the drilling parameter creation. There are other ways to pull in the WXML data, and one of them is actually an LAS import, believe it or not. So Pason, Schlumberger, all of these folks have options to export, typically from their data hub or interface. They have ways to export the data to an LAS format or a CSV format. If you export to LAS, depth-based and or time-based, we can turn around and import that. So this option, this LAS import option, this is great for pulling in historical wells data. So let's say you want to get started with this right away, look at the last 10 wells you drilled in 2017. This would be a way to load in that sensor data to be able to use some of the tools like that multi-curve analysis. We've had clients approach us to say, what about other sources of data? So PyHistorians, we haven't built it, but it's possible. CSV files, sure, it's all possible. These are the tools we've built so far, but we are constantly evolving this process. We really want to see you have ways to get this data in to make it useful. So the focus has been very much drilling so far, but everything we've shown you, like this time tracks tab where we can present the sensor data beside WellView data, it's a general concept. This could be applied to frac curves, cementing curves, clean out, anywhere, well servicing rigs. If you are capturing sensor data, all of this could be applied. So we've had a few clients approach us to say, well, fracs would be pretty neat, especially if we could build some workflows to help populate the frac tables in WellView. We are excited to have these conversations and progress these concepts. The reality is drilling data is more mature, I guess you would say, this concept of a Witsmill server and this attempt at standardization. The frac data is not in that state, but that's okay because we need to start working towards that. Okay, so question to the attendees. Are you interested in this project? Do you want to learn more? We will have follow-up webinars on it, but if you would like us to follow up with you, we are happy to do so to discuss how you can get this up and running. Also, I'll mention that we are working closely with Payson right now on a way to pull in the sensor data, tower sheet, rig activity, rig floor memos, basically any data we can get from them via their data mart. So there'll be another addition to the slide that shows a Payson data mart as a way to pull in this data and more. And we'd also love to hear from you if you have fracking interest or other sensor data that you think would be worth pursuing. Okay, so this is a huge new area for WellView. It opens up a whole new world of analysis and works us towards removing some of the manual data entry. So I mentioned the LAS import as a way to pull in time and depth-based curves. It has been greatly enhanced in 10.3 to support those concepts. We've added in a wellbore selector. You can specify if it's depth or time-based. This is important because the depth-based logs go to the log curve tables. The time-based logs go to the time curve tables. They're used differently within the application. And from the providers like Schlumberger, when you export to LAS, you specify on that end whether it is depth or time as well. Okay, so they are two separate concepts. We give you the option to append to an existing log. The log type library is the same library you have in the edit data dialog. And then most importantly, we let you pick and choose the curves to import. Because if you get 100 curves in your LAS file and you only need 10, just import the 10. Importing comments, the feature down at the bottom. Some of these providers, like Payson, actually put the rig floor memos in the LAS if you export them. That's really neat because in time tracks, you can show all of the rig floor comments. Every little test or survey they've done gets annotated into a curve, and we can show that. So that's pretty cool. Okay, that's the story with sensor curves. 10.3 signals that we have more calculations in the application. So if we look at the history or the evolution of the calc model, back in 10.0, we had 2100. For the folks still on WellView 9, we had something like 1700 calc fields. So there's huge growth from 9 to 10. 10 to 10.1, 200 more calcs. 10.1 to 10.2, 100 more calcs. Check this out. Substantial new number of calcs. And even though this is work for us, I'm actually really excited when I get calc requests because it's always an opportunity to do more with that underlying data. So we've had a lot of feedback from clients regarding frac data and KPIs that they would like to see. So cost per stage, cost per length, cost per proppant, proppant mass per day, per stage, per length, plugs per day, stages per day, a way to relate stim stages to plugs before they're pulled. For cleanouts, a way to relate drill parameters to plugs. So when you look at the stim table in the edit data dialog, you're going to see a whole bunch of new calcs there. So here's just a snippet, the calculated results, gross and net length of the frac, gross and net durations, number of clusters, number of plugs, etc. Okay, so this is all, value coming from that underlying data that you're capturing in WellView. The sensor project has driven a huge number of KPIs on the drilling side. When you pull down rig activity, so if you're able to import rig activity, the calc engine can summarize it by day, by phase, by BHA, by job, by rig crew, by formation, by wellbore. Rig crew, did you know the WellView 10 model supports capturing rig crews? So you can actually do analysis on your rig crew, compare your day shift to your night shift. Okay, that's a whole other topic and probably data that isn't being captured today, but a big potential. Okay, so using rig activity throughout the model, then take these concepts multi-well. It's a big concept. So for those rig crews, we can calculate things like duration on and off bottom, duration depth, ROP, sliding, rotating, by rig crew and by day. So different ways to slice that drilling parameter data. So if you want to use calcs like that, you need to have better drilling parameters. Have better drilling parameters, you import them in from the sensors. So this is all coming together. Sure, we could have added these calcs in before, but if you had one drilling parameter for a day, your results are not obviously any good. With this rig crew concept, we can relate rig crews to time log NPT safety incidents. So you can know, the morning or day shift typically has fewer incidents than the night shift. These are the stats that people are wanting to extract from the data. And we can get those average drilling parameters from the sensor data to populate the drilling parameter table. Now, in addition to a lot of frac calcs, drilling calcs, we have some that relate to failures. So at the well header, total number of failures entered for this well, number of failures in the last 12 months, the age of the well, last job and job report at the header level. This helps with multi-well reporting specifically. And then additional safety KPIs. So lots of value in that calc engine, and happy to hear from clients with more calc requests. It's something that that we're happy to put into the application because it really does give you additional value from that underlying data. Okay, check it out. Another new tool, a multi-schematic. So let's look at this in the application. So here I am back in the Well Explorer, and there is a new tab here, multi-schematic. And multi-schematic lets me present up to 8 wells side by side. This is just like the single well schematic in that you have a series of templates. So here I'm looking at a basic geology with a linear scale. I can see formation lithology. I can see imported sensor data, my gamma. I can double click and go to the edit data dialog. I can choose different templates. So I can construct these templates and pick and choose what kind of data I want to present there. So a few extra features. Over here on the far right, this well actually has 2 legs. So I can use this wellbore selector to switch between wellbores. You're seeing the wells in their most recent state by date. There's an additional feature that lets you view the wells from a normalized time scale. So if I say days from spud, I get this little time slider at the bottom. And look at what happens as I drag it over. So days from spud 11, I can see where we are with these various wells. So this is an interesting concept. We normalize all of the dates within the well to spud date, and then we can show them playing out on this time scale. So as you have well servicing interventions and completions equipment is run and pulled, you would see that being played out over the history of this time scale. So current well state or a days from spud concept. So the schematic, like multi-curves, this is version 1.0. It's already got some great features. It's there for you to use, but it is going to evolve as we get more feedback. The first thing I'm going to point out here is that today, these wells are not sharing a depth scale, so that's important to know. They all have an independent depth scale. So our next version, version 2.0, will allow you to have a normalized depth scale. Okay, so keep that in mind. We really are just putting these 4 wells side by side, but their scales are not normalized. Okay, so that's where we are today with this concept of a multi-well schematic. We are looking for ways to make it most useful. So things like these time concepts, or ways to let you do some analysis or comparison. Geologists get quite excited about this look of the data. Production users, folks who are focused on fracs, want to compare frac intervals well to well. So there are lots of applications across the different user base for WellView, but would love to hear from you about what you think would make it most useful in your organization. Now, regarding all of these tabs, so there's been substantial growth in 10. We started with wells and multi-wells. Now we've got multi-schematic, integrity, map, curve analysis. The administrator controls which tabs show up by UDL profile. So if you want to hide some of these, you can hide them in the UDL settings. Okay, by profile, you choose which of these tabs show up, multi-well and single well. Any questions about the multi-schematic or calcs before we dive into the next section? Okay, so some miscellaneous additions to wrap up with. In WellView 10.2, we added in a general audit tool, which is a way for administrators to create their own audit rules. Gives you a lot of flexibility, a lot of control over the audit rules that you can use. The top feature is a new option to have a variable date. What this is really about is to help catch those bad dates. So if someone types in 2028 instead of 2018, this would be a way to flag that. So you're basically looking for dates that are less than today plus 1. From a daily entry perspective, this doesn't always make sense to do, because if you're putting in, old data, or you're planning out, or there are dates that go beyond a day range, it doesn't make sense. But for a daily audit for the rig site users, this would be a way to help catch those erroneous dates. WellView XML is a new import format that we added in WellView 10.2, and it's effectively the WellView data model. So we are talking to some third parties about writing their data to WellView XML, and as such, we've enhanced our import capabilities. And then by popular request, my wells and recently opened wells are now consistent across tabs. So when you look at the My Wells on the Explorer, you get the same My Wells in the map, you get the same My Wells in the Integrity tab. Same with recently opened wells. And the Edit Data Previous button has returned. So we heard from enough end users that they wanted that previous button back. It is now back in Edit Data. Okay, so we have covered a ton of information. WellView 10.3 has a lot of new features in it. The best place to see all of the details is the release notes. So they are in the admin guide. There's a 30-page PDF that covers everything I've shown in this PowerPoint, and then more detail. Things like how do you configure rig crews in the WellView 10 model, more detail around the workflows of pulling in the sensor data. How do you upgrade from your current version? Okay, so the release notes is the place to start. It is meant to be end user friendly, it's high level. Every single detail that's changed is in something called the detailed change report. So in the download section of the premium support site, you'll see an Excel file that has hundreds of line items. Every calc that was added, every typo that's been fixed is documented there. The online application help is up to date. So how does multi-curves work? You can look at that in the online help. And then finally, contact us. Give us a shout. If you want help, if you want to look into pulling in sensor data, we would love to hear from you. The industry isn't as far down the path of standardization as one would hope. I'm trying to be diplomatic here. We really need to work with you to ensure that your setup is successful. Things like log mnemonics vary provider to provider, and they can even vary rig to rig for the same provider. In North America, the situation is a little more settled down in that if you use Pason, you get the same mnemonics always. We have mapping files to help with these issues, but we really should work with you out of the gates to ensure it's smooth. Okay, so if you want to talk sensors, please contact us. We want to help you be successful there. And these concepts, like what we do with the sensor data, the analysis we can do with curve analysis, what the multi-schematic provides, they are evolving. So we absolutely do want to hear from you. In terms of support and future webinars, we are actively working on some for data loading strategies, help have discussions about how to get data into WellView, reduce the amount of typing by the end users, and then look for one on the new task manager, including this service to pull down sensor data and the data warehouse. So that concludes our presentation of WellView 10.3. We have 2 minutes to go. If anyone has some additional questions, this would be a great time. Okay, a few questions about the multi-well schematics and will we be able to show TVD or MD when we have the normalized scale? Absolutely, that is the plan. We also want to allow you to be able to zoom across all of the wells. So you could go look in, inquire into the intermediate casing point across the wells and do comparisons in that way. So normalized depths being MD and TVD. Excellent. Well, thank you everybody for participating, and let us know if you have any questions at all.